Echo 5? What is that, your gamer tag?
The general's laughter echoed through the hangar. Officers joined in, smirking, thinking it was just another rookie pilot playing dress-up. She didn't answer. She just tightened her gloves, walked past the smirks, and climbed into her F-16. 15 minutes later, her voice broke through the comms. Calm, precise, surgical. 2 enemy aircraft down. 1 evasive roll never before recorded. The base went silent. Because Echo 5 had just broken a combat flight record that had stood untouched for 20 years. Welcome to the human stories. Before we dive into this powerful journey, tell me in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit the subscribe button. Elena Monroe never looked like the kind of pilot who'd shake the sky. She was too young, too beautiful, too composed. Her pale blonde hair was always neatly tied back beneath her flight cap, her posture perfect, her voice calm. At 27, she had more simulator hours than most captains had logged in real flight time, but none of it seemed to matter on that base in Nevada, because to the rest of them, especially the brass, she was just the daughter of Colonel Monroe, a name that opened doors but also built invisible walls. Stationed at Nellis Air Force Base, she had been reassigned from intelligence coordination to flight command after acing a series of test evaluations. Her instructors had flagged her precision as abnormally instinctive, and one even noted she operated like she hears the plane speak. But high command was reluctant, not because of her skill, but because no one knew where it came from. She'd skipped the traditional climb through the academy ranks. She didn't boast combat history, she wasn't loud about her qualifications, and worst of all, she didn't brag. They didn't trust silence, especially in a world that celebrated bravado. Her call sign, Echo 5, wasn't chosen. It was given based on an early simulator glitch where her cockpit audio had failed, and she flew a perfect mission with no sound feedback, relying only on visuals and instinct. Most called it luck, others mocked it. The name stuck. To them, it sounded soft, game-like. The day she was cleared for her first real drill flight, everything was already stacked against her. The hangar was buzzing, more observers than usual. An open training run had been scheduled for that morning, and a senior visiting general from D.C. happened to be present, making a surprise inspection. General Rickard had decades of air combat under his belt and a known reputation for being blunt. When he scanned the list of pilots and paused at her name, someone whispered that she was Colonel Monroe's girl. That set the tone. She walked into the ready room in full flight suit, green fatigues crisp, patches pristine, her helmet tucked under one arm, checklists memorized. The other pilots, all men in their 30s or older, watched her like she didn't belong, like this was a movie and she was cast in the wrong role. Rickard raised his voice as she approached the formation. "Which one of you is Echo 5? Elena stopped, stood tall. "Sir, that's me." He looked her up and down. "Echo 5, what is that, your gamer tag?" The room chuckled. It wasn't friendly laughter. It was a dismissal, wrapped in a punchline, a jab meant to put her back in her place, wherever they thought that was. She didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She simply replied, "Call sign assigned during tactical eval, sir. Protocol Echo, 5th Group Sortie." Rickard scoffed. "Right, tactical evaluation. Let's hope you're better in the real thing. Planes don't care how pretty you are." Another laugh, louder this time. She turned away without another word and walked toward her jet. From the tower, one of the junior commanders leaned to his colleague and muttered, "She's going to get eaten alive out there." But what no one in that room knew, not the general, not the other pilots, not even the tower, was that Elena had been trained, not officially, not in a classroom, but in the deserts of New Mexico, in classified no-fly zones, under the eye of a man who hadn't logged public flight hours in over a decade. Her father, Colonel Monroe, had taught her everything, after hours off the books, between missions and debriefs. He was a legend among pilots, the kind who still had books written about him in aviation circles. And Elena? She was his only student. Now she was about to prove it. The tarmac shimmered beneath the mid-morning sun as the roar of engines cracked through the dry Nevada air. 6 F-16s lined the strip, sleek, lethal, and gleaming in perfect formation. This wasn't combat, not technically. It was a joint aerial maneuver exercise simulating enemy engagement, radar lock evasion, and coordinated formation under duress. But everyone knew these drills weren't just for data, they were for reputation. Every maneuver, every second of hesitation, every wing dip would be logged, analyzed, and whispered about in command lounges, especially today, with a general watching. Elena climbed into her cockpit with methodical ease, as if she'd done it 1,000 times. She had, in fact. Not in official logged sorties, but in simulations, private hangars, and the quiet early mornings when her father had taken her flying through canyons no one else dared thread. She slid the helmet over her head, locking it down, though she left the visor up just a moment longer. Across from her, one of the senior pilots in the drill, Major Kelton, smirked from his cockpit and made a slicing motion across his throat, as if predicting her crash before takeoff. It didn't shake her. It confirmed what she already knew. They weren't just skeptical. They were rooting for her to fail. Eagle formation, the command crackled through the comms. Standard 2x3 grid. Echo 5, your tail end Charlie. Stay tight. Do not break protocol. Copy, Elena replied, her voice even, steady. Wheels up. The jets roared down the runway one by one, lifting like steel falcons into the cobalt sky. The formation fell into place, and for the first 10 minutes, it was flawless. Routine banks, clean spacing, radar checks. Then came the twist. The supervising flight control had planted a surprise. An adversary drone with simulated lock-on capabilities would join the field without warning. Pilots were meant to respond under pressure, communicating and coordinating evasive maneuvers while maintaining formation. At 11:12 a.m. it appeared, a simulated bogey, high-speed, AI-guided, with mock missiles and ECM scrambling. Bogey inbound from 10 o'clock high, one of the pilots shouted. Form split, Echo 5, maintain rear. But something was wrong. The drone wasn't following predicted patterns. It cut sharp into the lower altitude range and accelerated beyond simulation norms. One of the F-16s in formation, Major Kelton's, dropped a full 200 feet off course, trying to adjust. Then the unthinkable happened. His fuel system issued a failure signal midair. I've got a red light. Fuel integrity compromised. Kelton's voice cracked in panic. I'm venting and losing thrust. Regroup! Regroup! The tower's voice was sharp, almost frantic. Return to base. Echo 5, stay clear. But Elena didn't. She scanned the positioning. Kelton was spiraling into descent, too fast, too steep. His ejection would leave the plane to crash somewhere beyond the safe zone, possibly near the civilian perimeter. Worse, his trajectory threatened the rest of the squad if they dropped back to help. Every second counted. Echo 5, disengage, repeat, disengage, let flight command handle it. She ignored the order. Instead, she banked hard left, so hard that her own sensors screamed under the G-forces, and dove toward Kelton's F-16. Her maneuver was impossibly tight, unorthodox, and outside the standard playbook. What the hell is she doing? Someone yelled in the tower. Her voice came through the comms, flat and composed. Echo 5, initiating vector tether. There was no such maneuver in the manual. She positioned her jet parallel to Kelton's, less than 30 feet away, close enough for wake turbulence to rock her wings, close enough that one miscalculation would send both of them crashing. She mirrored his angle, adjusted for drift, and began using her jet's own air pressure to redirect his descent. The physics of it were absurd, but it worked. The combined slipstream pressure slowed Kelton's fall. She stabilized him long enough for emergency response to scramble a refueling bird, which swooped in seconds later to offload just enough fuel to get him back to base. The other jets had returned. The tower was silent. Even Rickard, who'd been shouting orders minutes before, was stone quiet. She landed last. The hangar fell into stunned stillness as she stepped down from the cockpit, helmet under her arm, face streaked with sweat, hair damp against her neck. She didn't smile. She didn't look for approval. She simply walked past them all, eyes forward. The next day, a quiet note appeared on the base bulletin board. Flight deviation registered by Echo 5, under review. Major Kelton, grounded for inspection, cited, emergency deviation without call-out. Echo 5 maneuver logged as vector tether protocol. Under classification review. Outcome, lives saved, aircraft saved, civilian zone protected. And beneath that, scribbled in pen by someone anonymous, real pilots don't follow manuals, they write them. The briefing room was colder than usual, not because of the air conditioning, but because of the weight that had settled over every officer in the room like concrete dust. When Elena entered, shoulders squared, uniform crisp, hair still damp from the shower, every head turned, but none spoke. Not yet. On the central screen, paused mid-frame, was footage from the day before. Multiple angles. One aerial cam caught the moment her jet peeled off from formation with impossible precision. Another caught the moment she aligned with Kelton's crippled plane, meters apart. Her hands didn't shake. Her mouth didn't move. She flew like a machine built for war, but with a human instinct no simulation could replicate. Colonel Braxton stood by the screen, arms crossed, jaw tight. He'd been one of her most vocal skeptics, and everyone knew it. It was Braxton who'd scoffed when she'd first been assigned to Echo Flight. Braxton who'd told her, within earshot of other officers, that combat decisions aren't made with gut feelings, they're made with protocol. Elena sat alone at the end of the table. He didn't look at her. "We reviewed the footage," he said finally, turning to face the officers before her. Echo 5 disobeyed 2 direct flight commands and violated 5 maneuvering protocols. Murmurs stirred, some nods of approval, the classic posture of command reinforcing the chain of discipline. Braxton let the silence build. And in doing so, she prevented a fatal crash, saved a fully armed F-16, preserved the safety perimeter, executed a maneuver that, frankly, no one in this room could replicate. Now, his gaze locked with hers. But this time, it wasn't disdain. It was disbelief, something closer to awe, but restrained by pride. "She should be court-martialed," one senior officer murmured from the far end. Braxton didn't blink. "No," came a voice from the doorway. A hush fell instantly. Every head turned. A man stepped into the room, his shadow stretching across the floor. No one had heard the door open. No one had expected him to be here. General Nathan Rourke, commander of the 9th Air Combat Wing, a legend in the force, the kind of man who hadn't attended a post-drill review in over a decade. He wasn't just a general, he was the general. No one spoke. Even Braxton stiffened slightly, his arms dropping to his sides. Rourke said nothing at first. He walked past the screen slowly, eyes scanning the paused footage, then looked toward Elena, not down at her, eye to eye. He stopped beside her chair. The silence was absolute. Then, without a word, he raised his hand and placed it flat against his heart, a slow, deliberate motion, and bowed his head. No one could believe it. Not a salute, not a commendation. Something quieter, older. It wasn't military tradition. It was human respect. The kind given by warriors who recognized something sacred in the one standing before them. Elena didn't move. Her eyes glistened slightly, but she said nothing. Then Rourke turned to the rest of the room. "If any of you still question who the real pilot is in this room, you're not qualified to sit here." He walked out, just like that. No awards, no fanfare, no ceremony. But that silence he left behind, it said more than medals ever could. The vector tether protocol was reclassified the next day, not as an infraction, but as a pioneering maneuver. Elena's name was placed beside it, and from that moment on, no one ever called her Echo 5 again. They called her the last pilot flying. She stepped off the aircraft in silence, boots hitting the concrete with a soft, grounded thud. No fanfare, no applause. Just the fading roar of the engine behind her and the golden haze of a sun dipping toward the horizon. The air was still warm, the base unusually quiet, and for a few seconds, it felt like she might just disappear into the silence. Her helmet was hooked to her side bag, blonde hair pulled back tight, a few strands blown loose by the wind. Her flight suit was marked, dust, a scuffed patch on one shoulder, dried blood smeared faintly across the edge of her wrist. She looked straight ahead, walking past the first row of buildings without glancing at anyone. She didn't need recognition, not after what she'd been through, not after the disbelief, the condescension, and the smirks from men who thought the controls belonged in anyone's hands but hers. She had nothing left to prove, not to them, not even to herself. But then something shifted, barely at first. A technician put down his wrench. 2 officers stopped mid-conversation. A junior pilot lowered his coffee cup slowly, eyes fixed on her as she passed. A mechanic pulled off his visor. People started standing still, facing her. Quietly, one by one, as if compelled by something unspoken. By the time she reached the halfway mark across the tarmac, the path ahead had formed a corridor of figures, ground crew, instructors, pilots. None of them said a word, but they were all watching. Then a sonic rumble cracked overhead. She didn't flinch. A single F-16 swept low over the runway, then climbed sharply into a clean vertical, peeling back into the sun. It was no stunt, no salute. It was Kelton, his way of saying, "We saw you. We know." She stopped walking for just a moment, tracking the jet's arc with her eyes, then lowered her gaze and resumed her steps. At the far end of the path, the salutes began. One by one, first a sergeant, then a captain, then 2 more, then 10. Uniformed men and women, some in flight suits, others in fatigues, standing at attention, raising hands to brows not for rank, but for respect. She didn't know most of them. They hadn't trained together, they hadn't flown together. But today, they had watched something they would never forget, and they knew what it meant. Then came the last figure from the shadows of Hangar 6, civilian jacket, olive green, worn jeans, no medals, no fanfare, just presence. General Rourke, no uniform, no escort, just him. He walked toward her with the same quiet determination he always carried, stopping directly in front of her. He didn't smile, he didn't blink. He just said, low and clear, "You didn't just land that jet. You landed every doubt we ever had." She didn't speak. Couldn't. Her throat tightened, but her eyes held steady. He placed one hand on her shoulder briefly, then stepped aside and let her pass. She walked on, through the sea of silence, through the line of salutes, through the weight of history shifting on its own axis. She passed the ready rooms, the mission brief walls, the old lockers still covered in stickers from 1,000 stories that had never been told. And then she entered the quiet of the pilot's lounge. No one was inside, just the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of an F-16 taxiing somewhere far off on the runway. She sat down on the old leather bench. No cameras, no voiceovers, no medals, just the sound of breath. Across from her, on the far wall, were the engraved plaques, one for every pilot who had led missions under fire, saved crews from certain death, or flown through storms no one thought survivable. Most of the names were faded, but one stood out, brand new, still gleaming. Ember Maggie E. Monroe. She exhaled slowly. For the first time in years, she felt no pressure. No need to outperform, outfly, or outfight anyone. The mission was over, and her name was no longer just on a manifest. It was on the wall. This was one of those stories you don't forget, because behind every uniform, there's a name, a soul, and sometimes, a storm they had to fly through alone. This story was brought to you by The Human Stories. Tell us in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, hit the subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and we're honored to have you with us.